In this video, we look at inflation. Inflation is an economic concept that has been a topic of discussion for centuries. It refers to a sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. In other words, inflation is a rise in the cost of living. This concept can have a significant impact on an economy and its citizens, especially in the long run. Inflation is typically measured using price index such as the Consumer Price Index. The CPI measures changes in the prices of basket of goods and services that are typically purchased by consumers. The basket is representative of the consumption pattern of a typical household. The percentage change in the CPI over a period of time is used to calculate the rate of inflation. For example, if the CPI was 100 in 1 year and 102 the next year, the rate of inflation would be 2%. Now let's look at the causes of inflation briefly. Inflation can be caused by a number of factors, including supply and demand imbalances, changes in the monetary policy, and increases in production costs. Demand pull inflation occurs when demand for goods and services in an economy outpaces the supply, causing prices to rise. This can be seen in situations where the economy is growing rapidly and consumer spending is increasing. When consumers are spending more money, companies are able to charge higher prices for their goods and services, leading to an overall increase in prices. Cost-push inflation is caused by an increase in production costs, such as the cost of raw materials, the cost of energy, or labor. For example, if the price of oil, which is an important input for many industries, increases, companies will have to pay more for their raw materials. This will increase their production costs, which will be passed to consumers in the form of higher prices for goods and services. The recent food inflation that has rocked the world economies following the war in Ukraine is a typical example. Monetary policy can also play a role in causing inflation. Central banks can increase the money supply by printing money or lowering interest rates. This increase in the money supply can lead to higher consumer spending, which can result in demand pull inflation. On the other hand, if central banks raise interest rates, this can significantly increase production costs, which can also lead to cost-push inflation. Now, coming to the cure for inflation, the central bank of a country, which is responsible for the monetary policy, plays a crucial role in controlling inflation. The main tool used by central banks to control inflation is the interest rate. When inflation is rising, the central bank can increase interest rates to reduce consumer spending, which can help to reduce the demand pull inflation. On the other hand, if the economy is in a recession, the central bank can lower interest rates to stimulate spending and boost economic growth. This can help to prevent cost-push inflation, as companies are more likely to keep prices stable in a competitive environment. In addition to controlling inflation through interest rates, the central bank can also influence inflation through open market operations. By this, open market operations involve buying and selling government securities, which can increase or decrease the money supply in an economy. When the central bank buys government securities, it injects money into the economy, which can increase consumer spending and boost economic growth. This can also increase demand pull inflation. When the central bank sells government securities, it withdraws money from the economy, which can reduce consumer spending and slow down economic growth. This can also help reduce demand pull inflation. Now, coming to the effects of inflation. Inflation has both positive and negative effects on an economy and its citizens. It is not always a bad thing as most people want to think. On a positive note, some moderate level of inflation can stimulate economic growth by encouraging investment and consumer spending. And the keyword here is moderate level. When prices are rising, consumers are more likely to spend their money sooner rather than later, which can boost aggregate demand. Inflation can also encourage innovation as companies seek to find new ways to increase their profits in the face of rising prices. This can lead to the development of new technologies and products that can benefit the economy and its citizens. On negative effects, inflation reduces the purchasing power of money, as the same amount of money end up buying fewer and fewer goods and services. This can lead to a decline in the standards of living for many citizens. Inflation can also create income inequality, as those with fixed incomes, such as retirees, are hardest to hit by the decline in purchasing power. Inflation can also increase the cost of borrowing, as lenders demand higher interest rates to compensate for the decline in the purchasing power of money. This can limit access to credit for many people, particularly those with low incomes. Now let's look at a typical example on the impact of inflation, say, on a university. For universities, inflation can lead to increases in the cost of resources such as textbooks, laboratory, equipment, and technology. This can lead to higher tuition fees and other charges for students. It can also impact the salaries of university staff. If the cost of living is rising, employees may demand higher wages to compensate for the increase in the cost of goods and services. This can lead to higher labor costs for universities, which can be passed on to students in the form of even higher tuition fees. For students, inflation can make it more difficult to finance their education. As the cost of living rises, students may have to spend more on rent, food, and other necessities. This can leave less money available for tuition fees and other education-related expenses. Inflation can also impact the value of students' loans. If inflation is rising, the value of the loan may be eroded over time, as the same amount of money will buy fewer goods and services, requiring that they borrow more, leading to increased levels of student debt. To recap, inflation can stimulate economic growth and encourage innovation. It can also decrease the purchasing power of money. It can create income inequality and increase the cost of borrowing. Monetary policy, however, plays a crucial role in controlling inflation, and the central bank of a country can use a variety of tools to manage inflation, including interest rates and open market operations. Overall, it is important for individuals and institutions to be aware of the impact of inflation and to take steps to manage its effects.